Jackie M here. How are you today? And I am on the third in my series of 5 Christmas live broadcasts. And today I'm going to be doing beef rendang, one that I've done quite a lot of in previous broadcasts, previous videos, but this is a completely, well, sort of different recipe because this is actually a recipe from my hometown in Seremban in Malaysia, which is down south, about 40 miles south of Kuala Lumpur. And Seremban is actually the capital of a state called Negeri Sembilan, which is basically comprised of, traditionally, the inhabitants were actually originally from Indonesia, right? So this is going to be a little bit different, but also what's going to throw everything. I'm not calling it the, Negeri Sembilan is basically the original inhabitants, right? The original immigrants into Negeri Sembilan, my home state, are called the Minangkabau people, right? I'm not going to call this the Minangkabau rendang because there are further tweaks to it, courtesy of my stepmom, right? So this is essentially the beef rendang that I grew up eating, courtesy of my stepmom, who drew her influence from the beef rendang of the area, the region of Malaysia that we grew up in. Okay, but I'm going to unpack that a little bit during the length of this broadcast. This may take a little bit longer than usual, and I may have to end it before we actually completely finish cooking the beef, right? Because we all know beef can take a little while to cook. In any case, by the way, if you don't know who I am, like I said, my name is Jackie M, and I am a former Malaysian restaurateur. I grew up in Malaysia, was right, well, I came to Sydney, Australia when I was 17, and I've run a restaurant here in Sydney, gave it up a few years ago to look after my Down syndrome toddler, Noah, who's actually in the back room. So he may come out and say hello at some point, and if you hear any kind of like noise, that's because he's jumping on his trampoline, right? Because he likes his trampoline, and also he goes through a lot of therapy, and it's one of those things that he does. I'm just hoping that everything is running okay. I'm running this concurrently on 2 different platforms, youtube.com/JackieM and also facebook.com/JackieMFood, which reminds me I need to share this on my other Jackie M page. So give me 2 seconds. And if you've got any questions, hit me up via your comments. I may not see them because I don't have an assistant with me during this holiday week. So I will try and answer them in my next broadcast or after this broadcast when I've had a chance to kind of see what people are saying, right? Okay, in any case, let's get started. I'm just going to get this plugged in. And I'm going to expound on the whole Christmas theme in a second. Okay, so like I said, this is the third in my series of Malaysian themed Christmas broadcasts. And part of the inspiration for that is, I've mentioned in my previous broadcast, the fact that during every Christmas, pretty early on, the family's duties in terms of what food they're bringing to the big, massive Christmas lunch that we're going to be having has already been divvied up, right? Someone's been allocated the turkey, the ham, the seafood, if you're my family. But you come down to the minor members of my family, then it's kind of like anything goes to some extent, right? So these are some ideas about some of the, in my situation, these are some of the ideas of some of the things that you can consider bringing along to your Christmas lunch this year, right? And like I said, I'm just going to try and rush through this a little bit because there are quite a few things to cover. But beef rendang, and I've mentioned before, if you have never seen any of my videos, go visit youtube.com/JackieM. I've done beef rendang on more than one occasion, I'm sure of it. And the version that you've seen up to this point in time has been the version that I have served in my restaurant, which isn't in itself a bad thing. But today I'm going to do something a little bit different, right? Keep in mind my Malaysian restaurant back in the day, I often had to make a lot of compromises, adjustments, etc. to accommodate my resources and also my clientele. This particular beef rendang, on the other hand, is one that my mom, my stepmom, has cooked since as far back as I can remember. And it's very labor intensive, which is why I didn't use it in my, for my restaurant. And the other point of difference as well I wanted to mention is this particular beef rendang, unlike a lot of beef rendang that I have since seen, right? This particular beef rendang actually uses sliced beef. That's one noticeable point of difference. I don't know if I'm going to be able to try and slice these these beef pieces here, but we'll see how we go. If not, I'll just have to use them as chunks, right? If you know, unless you buy from like an Asian butcher or something like that, if you were actually shopping for your beef cuts in an Australian supermarket, you would tend to find that they've already been either cut into steaks or they've been diced, right, into like, well, cubes. Whereas if you buy them from an Asian butcher, you can ask for like a piece or whatever, and then you take it home and then you slice it yourself. You slice it fairly thinly, right? So that's one point of difference, and that's the beef rendang. In fact, that was the only beef rendang I knew growing up. To me, it was quite unusual originally to come across beef rendang that was actually chunks of beef, right? Which ended up being the version that I did. So in terms of ingredients I'm using, I'm going to cheat and use some curry powder over here, and I'll talk about this a little bit. Now, the original traditional recipe for this uses like a whole bunch of different spices, things like galangal, turmeric, lemongrass, which I'm still using because to me lemongrass is fairly accessible, ginger and all that sort of stuff. Now, I know that like in my generation in Malaysia, and certainly in fact with my mom as well, right? When she cooked beef rendang, she used curry powder. So you don't have to go and hunt down turmeric, you don't have to hunt down galangal and all these fairly exotic ingredients. We just get a packet of Malaysian curry powder and then use that. Now, the other ingredient that I have started preparing, I mentioned this in yesterday's broadcast, this is dried chilies. And I'm going to blend this. What I've done so far with this is actually basically boiled it in my Thermomix, right? You can do this in the Thermomix, Thermocook, or in a saucepan. Add enough water to cover your dried big chilies, right? And then for about 10 minutes, keep it covered, and now it's softened. And what I'm going to do now is actually blend it to a paste, and that will give me the chili paste that I'm going to use for my beef rendang recipe here. Now, I know some people have been trying to get hold of the recipes that I've covered in the last 2 days. I'm sorry I haven't uploaded them yet. Hopefully, just by watching these broadcasts, you will be able to get some of the, get some ideas. If you've got any questions before I get a chance to upload them, I'm hoping to be able to do them tonight. But if you've got any questions in the meantime, hit me up and I'll try and answer them, right? But I've just been a little bit busy with the holiday season and all that. So dried chilies, so a little bit of liquid in here. I'm going to drain some of this out. Okay. And then I'm going to blend this quickly. And of course, you can, like I said, if you don't have a Thermocook or a Thermomix, you can boil the dried chilies in a saucepan and then transfer them into a blender with, just enough water for you to be able to blend them properly. And if you're still a little bit confused, I have in fact done a video in the past on how to make dried chili paste. So look up youtube.com/JackieM to follow the instructions from that, okay? Mention the point of difference between my Thermomix and my Thermocook is that if I were using my Thermocook, I would need to let the ingredients cool down to below 60 degrees before the blending function will work again. And that's just a safety feature of your Thermocook, okay? Not so with the Thermomix. Okay, so you can see that there. So I've got the chili paste. I'm going to throw in some onion, right? I want a fair bit of onion in here. I don't know if I need quite as much as I've chopped up. Okay, so that's about 2.5 onions. These are just regular brown onions. If you were using shallots, which are the smaller, I'm going to throw it on and I don't care. And I want garlic. I want a fair bit of garlic. How much have I got? I've got 4 cloves here. I'm going to add some more. Give me a second while I go and dig up more garlic. So this is pre-minced garlic. I'm just going to add to this. So where is my spatula? Okay, here you go. And by the way, don't forget to share this around your social media profiles for those who might be interested in Asian cooking or think that their friends or followers might be interested. And I've got some lemongrass here. It's already pre-minced, but I'm going to just throw it in just to give it another run through because it's a little bit fibrous. But lemongrass looks like this. And usually you will want to chop it up before you mince it in your blender or food processor. I tend to find that these kitchen machines, the Thermocook, Thermomix, do a much, much better job than your regular food processor, right? I know that from having broken quite a few food processors, trying to process these kinds of ingredients for my business, running a Malaysian restaurant, Malaysian food business. So that's blended. Now, the beef, right? I mentioned before that here in Australia, generally the beef you buy are cut into steaks, which makes it a little bit hard to slice because you would want to actually slice it against the grain. So I'll see how I go. Worst come to worst, I might just cut them into small chunks, right? But this is my mixture over here. You can see it. Okay, there's one camera and my next camera. If you can see this properly. Okay. What I'm going to do, this has got quite a bit of liquid in it from the, I'm just going to turn on my Sunbeam electric pan fry, frying pan. Okay, and while I'm at it, I'm just going to give a quick shout out to Lenovo Australia for providing me with the laptops that I use in my live broadcast. I'm using a Lenovo gaming laptop, a Y700, for one of my broadcasts, and for the other one, I'm running it off my Lenovo X1 ThinkPad X1 Yoga, right? And I want to give a shout out to Rode Australia as well for the microphones I use in my broadcasts. Okay, now, so I've got this. This is what we would call the rempah, okay, REMPAH. And I haven't put any oil in this yet on this pan. I'm just going to pan fry it just to reduce some of the moisture, and that will hopefully help alleviate the invariable kind of like spitting and the oil bubbling over when I do add it in, right? Because of the liquid in any kind of rempah mixture, especially one that has a lot of liquid in it. If you put the oil in now, it's going to start spitting, and it just makes a big mess of your kitchen. So I've got that, and I've got the beef. This is about half a kilo of beef, about a pound of beef. Like I said, when my mom does this, she would buy a long piece of gravy beef is what you want to look out for. This is what we use in our Asian cooking. Though, of course, having said that, right, I've got to point out that we Asians have a different concept of what makes a good cut of beef for some of our dishes to what Westerners think, right? Gravy beef, generally Westerners consider to be suitable for casseroles, which is probably not too far removed from what we would consider a rendang is, right? And I know every time I do a rendang recipe, a lot of people are not aware that there are lots and lots of different versions of rendang, okay? And in fact, when I sold chicken rendang at one of my outlets once, a lot of Westerners who have had, I guess, a tenuous link to Southeast Asia, or maybe they've been to Bali for a holiday or something like that. They think that their experience of a particular Asian named dish is the be-all and end-all, right? So this woman came over to my store, at my market store over here in Sydney, and asked my staff what it was, and she said it was chicken rendang. And she walked away with her nose up in the air. There's no such thing as chicken rendang, which really was a surprise to a native Malaysian like myself, right? So don't ever write off anything that you come across, right? Because your experience of a particular dish may not be inauthentic, but may not be the be-all and end-all of that particular dish in that part of the world where it comes from, right? Rendang, a lot of Indonesians will tell you originated from Indonesia. Malaysia is a multicultural country. It's a country of immigrants, and like I said, my home state in Negeri Sembilan actually was established by Indonesians from the Minangkabau ethnicity, right? So a lot of our cooking is influenced by the Minangkabau culture. And like I said, similarly with my mom's beef rendang, and that's mostly exhibited in the fact that the beef that she uses is sliced beef, not diced beef, not big chunks of beef, right? So having said that, there are points of difference which I'm going to go through as well, right, during this demonstration. I'm going to add the oil now because a lot of the liquid's now been absorbed. So just pouring some oil in. Now, my mom's version of this dish differs primarily in, apart from the use of curry powder. But like I said, you know, not too long ago, an Australian celebrity chef posted his rendang recipe on one of the Australian, you know, food publications. And Malaysians looked at it and think, why on earth has he got like all these different like exotic like roots and spices? Why is he pounding his like turmeric, and why is he like roasting his own cumin and all that sort of stuff? Because in Malaysia, everybody knows you just buy curry powder, okay? So sometimes Westerners who try to be a little bit elevated, a little bit esoteric in their attempts at interpreting our recipes kind of miss the whole point of it, you know. So I'm just, like I said, I'm just slicing up these beef chunks, right? I'd be doing a better job of this if I had a bigger piece of beef and if I've sharpened my knife, which obviously I haven't, as you can tell. So this, like I said, is what we call gravy beef. Gravy beef tends to be has a lot of tendon in it. But to us Asians, right, the tendons are part of the charm of eating like a rendang dish or something like that, because we like it to be, you know, a little bit chewy and, you know, a little bit melt in the mouth, right? Westerners tend to like to use chuck steak, right? And they generally like to use cuts of beef that are less fatty. So I've used beef brisket in the past as well for my beef rendang. And generally, I personally find if I use chuck steak, that the beef is a little bit coarse, a little bit tough, right? So gravy beef is probably one of the cheapest cut of meat you can find. But having said that, this does require some cooking, right? And if you want, at some point in time during the cooking process, you can scrape everything up and throw it into a slow cooker and turn it on and let it do its job for the next 5 hours, 8 hours while you go to work. But it's absolutely crucial that you do, if nothing else, fry up the rempah. Okay, this is what we call rempah, and basically rempah is basically the Malaysian term for curry paste. Okay. So my mom, my family's ethnicity is Chinese. Rendang is a very Malay Indonesian dish. So there is some my mom's version does have some Chinese influence in this, right? And I'm going to cover that in a little bit. And while I'm doing this, a lot of rendang recipes call for what's called kerisik, Kerisik, okay? And that kerisik is a very Malay ingredient, okay? And kerisik, and the reason why I say it's very Malay is because growing up as a Chinese, I never knew what kerisik was, okay? Neither do a lot of Chinese who ultimately move overseas, like to places like Malaysia, to like places like Australia and the US and all that. So these Chinese migrants like myself, right, then think, oh, we really miss Malaysian food. We're going to Google how to cook all these, and then you look up what kerisik means. You come across a word like kerisik, and you Google what it means, and at some point, someone made an incorrect interpretation of it, and it gets carried across for years and years. So most people generally have the wrong idea of what kerisik means. Okay, so if you're in doubt as to what kerisik is, ask your Malay friend. But I don't use kerisik. But what kerisik is essentially what they do is like back in Malaysia, you use fresh coconut for your to extract your coconut milk, coconut cream from, but you also use some of it with the flesh that's been you extract coconut milk, coconut cream from grated coconut, right? And some of the grated coconut, what you do is you pound it, right, till it becomes like a mushy paste, if you can picture it. And then you pan fry it till it's brown, right? And that's what kerisik is. What is usually incorrectly translated as, right, online, if you Google kerisik, a lot of people think it's just toasted desiccated coconut, and that is not kerisik, okay? So you're going to find a lot of people, a lot of bloggers, food bloggers, so-called experts themselves, who think that kerisik is just toasted grated coconut. In fact, if you type in kerisik, Kerisik, right now on Google and click on the images tab, you'll find half the pictures at least actually show you toasted grated coconut. That's not what it is, okay? Kerisik is, for all intents and purposes, like a paste, like a brown paste, sticky, icky brown paste. And you add it to your rendang to give it that nice, rich coconutty flavor. Okay. Curry powder, I'm going to talk about this. What my mom does is that she coats the beef with curry powder like this, right? And coats it really, really well. If she were making chicken curry, she would coat it a little bit more lightly, right? Because for this particular dish, it does actually take a lot of beef, has a tendency to be able to take a lot more curry powder than chicken, okay? Now, if you put too much curry powder for a dish like a chicken curry or something like that, you might find that your curry is going to taste like a little bit powdery, a little bit gritty, okay? So it's a little bit of a balancing act. Now, in terms of the type of curry powder, nowadays, when you go shopping at your local Asian grocery store and you look for curry powders from Malaysia, you will find that the Malaysian curry powders are a little bit more nuanced, right? We don't just have like cloves curry powder, right? We have meat curry powder, fish curry powder, and meat curry powder, fish curry powder, and rendang curry powder, right? This is meat curry powder. The idea, the point of difference among all these different types of curry powders is that they just got different balances of spices. Some might have more turmeric, some might have more fenugreek and all that, but that's the only difference. It doesn't mean that a fish curry powder can only be used for fish dishes, right? And vice versa. So the rendang curry powder usually has a lot more, I guess, more of the more earthy kind of like spices. I don't have rendang curry powder, so I'm using the meat curry powder here. So that's totally fine. So I've got this that's coated in curry powder, and I'm just going to add this in and stir it in and fry this. Now, usually my mom will be doing this in a wok. I'm just going to move this closer so you can see this here. Okay. Right. My mom usually would be standing over a wok and frying this, and she'll be there for half a day, right? So depending on how long the beef takes to cook and to tenderize. You could be there stirring this for a couple of hours, okay? And then what I'm going to do is just add some flavoring to this. Just give me a second. Okay, so I'm going to put in some chicken powder, chicken stock granules, and I'm going to put probably 1.5 tablespoons here. You can adjust the seasoning later on. I'm going to add a little bit of sugar to this, not too much. Okay, so about 1.5 tablespoons in here. So remember, this is about 1 pound of beef, right? And what my mom adds that makes it a little bit Chinese is that she puts a bit of soya sauce in it, okay? Now, the end result of this particular rendang is that it's going to look really, really dark, okay? So some rendang that you come across might be lighter in color, some might be darker. And the other point of difference between this recipe and what you would usually find in the traditional Minangkabau rendang is that the traditional version usually suggests that you throw all this in a pot with the coconut cream, coconut milk, and you simmer it, right? Till it's dryish, and then you start cooking it. My mom pretty much fries it, and then she keeps frying it. So you're going to end up with a fairly dry curry, okay? Like I said, there's so many different rendang recipes out there, you know, different parts of Malaysia have their own different take on rendang. Some people complain if the rendang is too dry, some complain that if there's too much sauce in it, it's not a rendang, it's a curry. But like I said, there's so many different versions of rendang. So just keep an open mind and stop accusing people of basically bastardizing what you learned to be rendang when you went to Bali for your last holiday. Okay. Those people like that are very, very annoying to people like me who actually grew up and lived in Malaysia. So there's this, right? And then what she does, coconut cream, right? I'm using coconut cream. You can use coconut milk, depending on what you use. You can adjust the amount of, coconut cream will be creamier, obviously, so you can use less of it. Or you can use a bit of coconut cream and add some water to it. But I want this to be quite a dry curry, right? The final result should be quite dry and should be virtually black in color. And you should see a nice sheen of oil across it. So I'm just going to add a little bit of coconut cream in here. Mix it in. Keep frying it. And keep doing that. Now, how I do my rendang recipe is I would fry up the paste, throw in the meat that's been coated with coconut curry powder, and then I would actually put in a whole bunch of liquid, put in a whole bunch of coconut cream, and I'll cover it and simmer it. Towards the end, I will leave the lids ajar or completely open so that more of the sauce gets absorbed. And then basically cook it till it's semi-dry, right? Whereas my mom would just stand over her wok and stir this and add the coconut cream very, very gradually. Let it gently absorb into the rendang, right? Into the beef. At the moment, the color is kind of like a brown color, and like I said, the final result should be like practically like a very, very dark brown, practically black color. Sorry, I'm starting to sneeze. So you get the idea with the rendang. Now, the rendang will keep out of the fridge very well if you cook it the way, right? This particular recipe, because it's a very, very you know, quite a dry rendang, it will keep quite well out of the fridge for at least a day or two. Yeah. If you've got too much of it, right, you can blend it in a food processor and use your rendang as a filling for sandwiches, right? Or you can actually use the minced rendang in a sushi roll, right? So make some sticky rice or sushi rice and then fill it up with some minced rendang. And of course, you can use the rendang as a pie filling, right? If you want to be very fusiony with your dish. But otherwise, just have it with some boiled rice or some coconut rice. You take it along for your family Christmas. Bring some sliced cucumber along. Because look, like I said, the traditional Christmas, you've got the poultry covered, you've got the ham covered. I don't eat pork, but you know, most people do who celebrate Christmas. You've got the seafood covered, but nobody really, you know, there's no traditional, as far as studying this neck of the woods anyway, there's no traditional red meat dish. So rendang could be your little multicultural addition to your next Christmas party. Okay, so I hope you can see this. I'm going to dish a little bit of this out so you can see it clearly. Like I said, the beef will need to cook a little bit longer so it tenderizes. And like I said, the gravy beef is probably the cheapest cut of beef you'll be able to find in an Australian supermarket. This was reduced to $5 for a half kilo pack, right? Which is, I mean, what beef can you buy for you know, for $5 for half a kilo nowadays? So this is a good way to go cheap, but also produce a really, really flavorsome dish as well. So what you want to do at the end of this is just adjust the flavors. You can add a touch more sugar. My mom puts virtually no sugar in her rendang. My rendang that I sell in my business is sweeter. And of course, like I said, you know, you can also omit the chicken powder. I use chicken powder. My mom uses it as well, probably not quite as much as I do. But soya sauce is one of her key ingredients. That seems to be one of her secret ingredients in her version of rendang, which kind of like adds the Chinese touch to it. But like I keep telling people, Malaysia is a multicultural country, right? And our food is heavily influenced by all the different cultures that make up its population. So my mom's rendang has been influenced by that of the Minangkabau population in our home state of Negeri Sembilan. And some of them, at the same time, she has put her own slant on it by using ingredients like soya sauce and also by using shortcuts like using a curry powder instead of traditionally like all these different types of roots and spices, right, in this. I'm going to stir this and keep this cooking for a little bit longer, and I'm going to take a photo. But just let me, in the meantime, just dish some out so you can see what it looks like. Okay, so that's camera 1. The rendang, camera 2, okay. It still needs to be darker because it needs to be cooked longer, and you want the onion, the rimpa, to be really, really well fried up, okay. So there you go, pretty easy, right? Give it a shot. The only thing, the only drawback of this particular recipe is that it does take a little bit of time. But you can, of course, do this while you're watching TV in the background. Okay, thank you guys. I'll see you tomorrow. Ciao.